Pardons. When you find yourself in deep water and you're granted complete amnesty based on presidential grace alone. Many people have received pardons, and for good reason. Like when Jimmy Carter pardoned 200,000 people for Vietnam draft evasion, or Barack Obama when he pardoned many people with prolonged sentences serving time for non-violent drug-related crimes. And of course, we can't forget to mention the people Donald Trump pardoned for the January 6th insurrection riot. Man, that thing was like a fever dream, you know? It's like, it almost feels like it didn't happen, because all the healing that's been taking place in the country lately. And just recently, Joe Biden pardoned a pretty interesting guy. No, not that guy. Yeah, that's the guy, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Fauci needs no introductions. But here's one anyway. He's been around since the 80s. Just recently, with all the COVID stuff, he was put in charge of basically leading the country through that tumultuous time, we can call it, right? Who told us to wear masks. He's the one who told us to do the 6 foot distancing to keep us all safe and sound and whatnot. And he's the one who put all these policies, kind of pushed for all the policies to be put into effect, like the whole, you having to be vaccinated in order to go to school, to go to work, to go into a restaurant. That's all sort of his doing, right? Just like a brief overview, like a bare bones layman's overview. Mind you, I'm a layman. Overview. The lockdown times are not a happy time. I remember the first day it happened, streets were just super clear. Like I've never seen my main street, St. George's Avenue, just completely empty. And then you're going online, you're seeing that people are running amok through the grocery store, stockpiling on toilet paper and surgical masks. Well, the surgical masks that stuff hadn't yet dropped yet, I don't believe, but toilet paper, food, hand sanitizer, people are just going bananas, all over the place. So for all of that, and for Dr. Fauci to receive a pardon after the fact, it just begs the question, why? If he did everything right, he did everything by the book, he swears up and down that everything he did was just, why are we giving the guy a pardon? And why are we giving the guy a pardon dating back to 2014? And these seem to be good questions, as a coalition of state attorney generals launched similar questions when they penned a letter to the House of Representatives asking to launch an investigation into Dr. Fauci and his mishandling of the entire COVID situation. They cite misleading statements, suppression of political and scientific debate, and overall mismanagement. Now, looking at the letter here, we can see their first point made to the House of Representatives is Dr. Fauci's proximal origin theory. This theory basically states that, or he was saying that, the disease that was found in one single animal made a leap from the animal to a human without any gain of function research, without any outside manipulation, no scientific manipulation. It just did it all on its own, completely naturally.
As I've said many times, many of us feel that it is more likely that this is a natural occurrence, as has happened with SARS-CoV-1, where it goes from an animal reservoir to a human. But we don't know 100% the answer to that.
They're saying that he knowingly lied about this, and this was to our detriment, because if we had a better understanding of what we were dealing with sooner, then we could have, possibly found a cure or the vaccine much sooner, thus saving lives. So they're taking that into account and holding him accountable for that. So they continue by citing Dr. Fauci's numerous denials in front of Congress that gain-of-function research was even taking place and that he had no part in it.
These experiments combine genetic information from different coronaviruses that infect animals, but not humans, to create novel artificial viruses able to infect human cells. Viruses that in nature only infect animals were manipulated in the Wuhan lab to gain the function of infecting humans.
Fauci, to put it mildly, lost his cool, denying once again the NIH had ever funded gain-of-function research. Here's what he said.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you were referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct.
There was a moment where he said in the same breath that gain of function research wasn't taking place, but if it was being done so under proper conditions and procedures. I wish I had the clip, but just believe me. They then cite failures of oversight at Dr. Fauci's NIH, with grants that was being given to EcoHealth Alliance being used to fund research for gain-of-function research at the Institute of Virology in Wuhan.
EcoHealth Alliance took the virus SHC014 and combined it with WIV1 and caused a recombinant virus that doesn't exist in nature, and it made mice sicker, mice that had humanized cells. You're saying that that's not gain-of-function research?
According to the framework and guidelines.
So what you're doing is
P3
defining away gain of function. You're simply saying it doesn't exist because you changed the definition on the NIH website.
And finally, they get to the suppression of scientific debate. For this one, I kind of just want to read a few sentences from the report or the letter itself. Dr. Fauci led a deliberate campaign to stifle the voices of premier health scholars regarding the lack of adequate testing of vaccines concerning the risk of myocarditis and pericarditis among young adult males, the verified increased risk of blood clots in women, and the long-term effects vaccines had on fertility. The notion of trusting the science not only was grotesquely false, but was the very definition of propaganda that contributed to the serious vaccine injuries, and in some cases, death. So basically, they are all over this guy, all right? This is a team of state attorney generals. Actually, let me show you just the list of everyone who even signed this. You have names and names and names, all different states, everyone who feels the same way that this guy, Dr. Fauci, should be held accountable in some way, shape, or form. The Supreme Court justice says that a pardon carries the imputation of guilt and acceptance a confession of it, which makes sense. If you're receiving a pardon for a crime you were committed of, that means on some level you're guilty, whether or not you were railroaded or you caught a plea deal, you admitted guilt at some point. So receiving a pardon is thereby an extension and admittance of that guilt. But if Dr. Fauci received a pardon, a presidential pardon, how can we see the state attorney generals asking the House of Representatives to launch an investigation into him? It should be done. There should be no other way around it, right? I had to do some digging because this was a burning question on my mind. And I saw a report that from 1915, President Woodrow Wilson concocted some sort of scheme in order to get two people to testify unwillingly. And here's how it went. The New York Tribune had reported that a person with political connections was smuggling jewels into the United States in order to avoid paying duties. The Wilson administration knew that the leaked information had to have come from the Customs Service and suspected that it had been obtained by bribery. A federal grand jury subpoenaed testimony from George Burdick, the city editor, and from shipping news editor William L. Curtin. Burdick and Curtin both took the fifth and refused to reveal the source of information. In 1914, Woodrow Wilson issued a blanket pardon to the men in a maneuver to force them to testify, because the Fifth Amendment does not apply if the person is immune from prosecution. They refused to accept the pardon or testify. Burdick was fined $500 and jailed until he complied. So that Supreme Court case was about setting a precedent, really. Are you allowed to turn down a presidential pardon? And for good reason, the Supreme Court ruled yes, you are allowed to turn down a presidential pardon. Because like we heard, Woodrow Wilson was trying to force these guys to testify because the Fifth Amendment would no longer apply to them, which means they couldn't plead the Fifth. They would have to answer any and all questions under oath in front of God and in front of the jury. I only bring this up because in my mind, if and when we ever see a real trial for COVID-19 and the bad actors that played a role in that, if Dr. Fauci is alive then, because we may not see this trial for years and years and years, this may be a way for them to get him to testify. Him being pardoned means that he cannot plead the Fifth anymore, which means that now he has to answer any and all questions truthfully, which doesn't say much because he's been seen lying under oath many, many times before.
I have never lied before the Congress.
But it's just something that, I found during my research of this video, and I thought it may be interesting for you all to know. So all in all, we have the coalition of state attorney generals that are going after Fauci, looking for responsibility to be held. And if this doesn't pan out, maybe sometime in the future, we have some sort of Nuremberg-esque trial where Dr. Fauci is compelled to tell the truth and own up to all the crimes that he's being, accused of now. This was a pretty interesting video for me to make. I've been wanting to just dive into the political sphere and do something that was interesting to me, and COVID-19 is very interesting to me. There's a whole lot that I didn't get to touch on here, like the 2014 blanket pardon dating back to 2014. There's a real reason for that I found through my research on this video, but it didn't really fit into like the framework of this video. So if you want to know more about that, just leave a like and a comment, maybe comment that so I can know, I can kind of gauge what you guys are all looking for and interested in. I'm going to be planning on making a lot of videos like this coming soon. I have a new setup here and I plan on using it. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying to the end of the video. If you have any suggestions or constructive criticisms that don't have to be constructive, just criticisms, critiques, I'm open and I'm willing to, take them all in and learn. Because I want to keep doing this. I want to get better and better at this as time goes on. So thank you so much for joining me for the first sort of new style of content or new form of content I'm doing on the channel. And have a great day. Be good people.